Want to discover London like never before? Step beyond the surface with Wow Tours. Explore the city's hidden spiritual secrets, walk ancient ley lines, and uncover the mysteries of London's past, present, and future. Brought to you by Wisdom on Wellness and led by renowned crystal author and Akashic Records reader Gemma Petherbridge, these are more than just tours. They're journeys into the heart of London's esoteric history. Book your spot today and see London through a whole new lens. Visit wowtourslondon.com for tickets. Hello and welcome back to the Wow Talks podcast. In this episode, we feature Paul Sheppard, one of the UK's leading anxiety coaches, known for helping thousands of people break free from anxiety over the past 25 years. Paul is also the host of the popular Mindset Change podcast, where he shares valuable tips on managing anxiety, boosting your mindset, and uncovering your true potential. In his talk titled Anxiety, the Wake-Up Call, Paul dives into how anxiety can be a powerful signal for personal growth and transformation, offering practical insights to help listeners move beyond fear and into a place of empowerment. So get ready to explore a fresh perspective on anxiety with one of the best in the field. We hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much, Courtney, for being here. And thank you to you all. This is my second year at Wisdom on Wellness. We're in a new location. It's so beautiful. You're definitely going to enjoy everything that needs to happen today for our wellness, for our physical health, and of course, how we feel inside. We're sponsored by Jasper Cacao, which is fantastic. And we are here with our first talk, and it's such a privilege to talk to you, Paul Sheppard.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you.
It is wonderful to talk to you. I think, like so many of us, have had real big bouts of anxiety, particularly when my daughter was born a few years ago. There was a lot of anxiety around that, around the birth, and since what it was to be a mother. But I was no stranger to anxiety, to be honest. So it was so good to see your name pop up. And I just was actually asking about the wake-up call, whether you decided, why you decided to call this talk the wake-up call.
Such a good place to start. So we often see anxiety as the enemy, what we want to get rid of. We hate it. We feel overwhelmed by it. And we have a culture that kind of promotes that too. So you're almost shamed if you feel anxious, like you're weak, there's something wrong with you, you're a failure. And the way, because I've had anxiety, I've been there, I've done that whole journey. And anxiety for me was a wake-up call. It was a message to say that I was living unsustainably and there needed to be a change, though I did everything I could, first of all, to try to get rid of it. Yeah, I did therapy, I did counseling, I trained as a counselor. I did all the things to focus on what was going on inside my head. And I was ignoring completely the other messages that anxiety was trying to give me. I just didn't know what to do. So that's why it's a big wake-up call to ask us, what is it that we really need to change?
It's really interesting. I love the title because I think it's so easy to just think, well, this is how I am. I'm built like this. It's all I've ever known. And I think you can end up sort of managing a scenario once you have that sort of stressed feeling with breath or... And I think the idea of actually waking up to maybe my life doesn't actually need to look like this, I think is so powerful. Can you just rewind and talk a little bit about what it was like at that time when you realized, right, I need to change something, and what was the lead up to it?
So I had generalized anxiety disorder, which also came in the form of repeated panic attacks. I remember my first panic attack. It was in front of my mother. It just came out of nowhere. I didn't know what to do. My mother didn't know what to do. And that feeling of powerlessness is what terrifies us the most. My mother just ran and gave me my inhaler. I used to suffer with asthma. And that didn't do anything, of course. It wasn't that what I needed. So I trained. I went to the doctors. And even with the doctors, they were saying, here's 5 questions. What's going on, what you're worried about, what's going on inside your mind. Here's some medication. This is what you should take. And I was so terrified of taking medication back then. I was just thinking, I don't know, this feels really wrong. So I didn't go down that route. But I was stuck. I felt powerless in regards to what can I do to get rid of this? I was stuck in that mindset. And it got to the point where it reached a crescendo. I was sat in the bathroom. I remember I was 21. And, I was just sat there holding a bottle of pills thinking, I'm tired, I can't go on, I don't know what to do. And I was almost sort of that point where tears are streaming down my face. I'm just thinking, this is it. And then out of nowhere, this voice just appeared. It sort of emanated from me, saying, you've got anxiety all wrong. And it was kind of a shock. And that voice just is like, you've just got to focus, move away from here and into here. And I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea, but it gave me a little bit of hope. Whereas before that, just before that experience, I couldn't see a future without anxiety being part of it. Now, suddenly, there was a little bit of light, and that led me to where I am today.
But that actually came from you. That came from within you. What was that voice, do you think?
Well, at the time, it was like, am I schizophrenic? Is it, what's going on? Is this something spiritual? Is it something otherworldly? Looking at it, we have a part of us, a deep intuition, a wisdom, a consciousness, which at moments of crisis, we can tap into. And it's very common for people to have these deep insights which come out of nowhere. That was mine. And it gave me the information to think about, okay, which direction should I go in? And it opened things up.
And what did you do? So that was a real rock bottom.
Yeah.
So what happened after that?
So I went and researched the biology of anxiety. Because I'm thinking, what's the body thing? I don't get it. Yeah, and really what it was referring to was I was breathing wrongly. Now, who teaches you how to breathe, right? No one, right? So I was thinking, okay, so I was a mouth breather, shallow breather. I was really putting my sympathetic nervous system, which is part of the survival system, under a lot of pressure through my lifestyle choices, drinking, caffeinated all day, really paid no attention to when I should be going to bed. It was like I could just do what I wanted to do, like as a teen would. All of these things were compounding into my nervous system being under too much pressure. And again, so all the research was pointing at alleviating that pressure, looking after the body, looking at it from a more holistic point of view. And that was groundbreaking because suddenly I started to feel less anxious. And that was like a little glimmer of hope. So I thought, I must be doing something, right? And yet that path continued.
Absolutely. What you're describing is happening the world over again and again and again, right now. Anxiety disorders are the world's most common mental disorders. So why do you think that anxiety is the most common mental disorder rather than, say, depression?
Anxiety is a completely normal response to how we're forcing ourselves to live our lives today. We're putting our nervous systems under huge amounts of pressure to be productive, especially for women. The mental load alone, as well as stereotype, all the sorts of things archetypes which women have to sometimes force themselves to live through. Men as well. It's not just gender-based, but all of these things put your nervous system under huge pressure. Combined with our diet, the way that we don't take sleep seriously, our obsession with screens, we're not communicating the way that we need to. I put it into 4 things, really. We're not looking after our mind, we're not looking after our hearts, we're not looking after our bodies, we're not looking after our purpose. So the way that we focus on, if we looked at it from a holistic point of view, because it's incredibly nuanced as to what triggers anxiety in someone. It could be hormonal for women. That can be a big part of it, as well as trauma from the past. That's compounding. And they may not be looking after themselves because they just don't have the time or don't know how. All sorts of things compound into that anxiety beginning to manifest itself as the mind, body, and spirit saying, we've got to change course because this is unsustainable.
And you spoke about the heart, and that really sort of stood out to me. What do you mean? Can you expand a bit on that and how we look after the heart?
Yeah, 2 sides of it is human connection. Like, how do we connect with ourselves, first of all? Do we love ourselves? Do we accept ourselves? Or do we have this sort of idea, unconscious or conscious, that we're not good enough, that we're not deserving, that we're not likable or unlovable? These are deep programs that a lot of people carry. And it kind of creates this lens for how they see and experience their world. So that's one thing. Obviously, then it comes to who are we having relationships with? Are we becoming disconnected from our family? Are we becoming disconnected from our co-workers? Loneliness is an epidemic. And when you look at mind, body, heart, and purpose, it really is saying to you, invest in each, just a little bit, and you can begin to feel better. Have a little bit more connection in your day. Not on a screen. That's lovely in some ways, but it won't give you the oxytocin, it won't give you the neurochemistry boost from a real connection. And that's why it's good that you're all here today and not online doing it through Zoom. It's being in person is such a big thing now. And we need to, it's almost like it's retro to do things in person. And we need to make that more of a thing again.
Absolutely. It's what's natural. It's how we were
absolutely.
built. And so it sounds like, talking about the heart, that actually there's a lot of work that we can all be doing to sort of work out where we're at and why we're there. It sounds like to sort of unpick a bit is really, really important.
Yeah.
In terms of therapy, you're a trained therapist, of course, like you said. What kind of therapy do you, what's your, I know you've actually got lots of boxes that you've ticked when I've researched you. Tell me a little bit about your journey as a therapist.
Yeah, so I started, God, I was young, 17 as a counsellor. Way too young, you shouldn't. I didn't understand it either. But I also knew, as I trained in so many different therapies, I love hypnotherapy, I love hypnotism. I think working with the subconscious mind is a powerful thing to do. But I prefer coaching. And the reason for that is there's two sides. One is therapy is wonderful to get to know yourself and understand yourself, but we can often spend too long on that. It's almost like we build this big, 5,000-page dossier getting to know ourselves. But we have a true self, our consciousness, and getting to know that part of us is really important, not just the ego and, this construct that keeps evolving. So I love coaching because I can be a bit more dynamic with it. I can get focused on people and their root causes of things and focus future-based, whereas therapy is past-based. So it's useful, but to look forward into the future and be able to have a future self and have a direction to go in changes the way that we think, feel, and behave today.
I love that distinction. I think I haven't even heard of that distinction, actually, about therapy talking about the past and coaching about the future.
Yeah.
And you also made another distinction that I thought was really brilliant. You talked about maybe that there is too much. We can kind of go into ourselves too much. And you obviously mentioned the word ego as well. And then you talked about true self. But can you talk a little bit about those two?
Yeah.
And they seem to sort of run in parallel, I would say.
Yeah, so the ego is essential for navigating this physical world, right? We especially as we're children, we have these very strong, demanding egos. It's all about us. And as we become older, as we mature, we hopefully will begin to focus on more about what's going on around us.
Like this projector going up.
It's lifting the window to show up.
Is that, did you plan this to happen?
Yeah, this is showing you the window of your soul while we're here. But the ego is a construct. It's who we think we are, our identity, our belief systems, create a lens on how we see reality. But it's not real. It's something that keeps evolving. And yet underneath that, you have a true self, your consciousness, your awareness. And if you ever practice any type of mindfulness and you're watching your thoughts, you're watching your feelings, you're observing what's going on around you, you've got to look at, well, who's doing the observing? What's doing the observing? And that is your awareness. And I did some work recently with Dr. Jose Corosmer, who wrote a brilliant book called Breakthrough. And we're talking about when you strengthen, it's called the central executive network within the brain. When you strengthen that part, the default mode network quietens. And the default mode network is the ego, the distracted brain, which is becoming quite epidemic in society. People can't focus. We have more ADHD, for example. So when the default mode network quietens, the central executive network focuses more. We can focus on more one thing at a time. We're less distracted. We can see the ego, we can see the thoughts coming in, and we're less attached to it. So we're more our true selves. It's a very, very powerful thing to do. This is why I'm a big advocate of mindfulness meditation and training your mind to look at your thoughts more objectively instead of just reacting to them as reality.
Absolutely. And you spoke about breath, and you spoke about historically you were doing it sort of all wrong. And tell me the way that you do it and the right way to do it. And I don't know if you want to sort of lead any breathing this morning or help us to be aware of our breath.
Yeah, so most people probably would have heard, if you have anxiety, to take a deep breath, right? If you heard that, take a big deep breath. Well, that can signal to your brain that there's a problem with what you're experiencing. So you're resisting your anxiety. I don't want it, and if I do this big deep breath, it will get rid of it. Well, that can just turn anxiety up. And most people breathe through their mouths. This is going to make everyone quite conscious now. But a lot of people are mouth breathers, which, again, keeps the breath very shallow. So you're triggering that sympathetic nervous system. So as we breathe in, we trigger the sympathetic, which keeps us alert. As we breathe out, we trigger the parasympathetic, and that calms down our nervous system. So we should be in balance. One way, if we do too much of either other, sympathetic, too energized, too much parasympathetic, too relaxed. So we want a balance. By beginning to just gently extend your exhale, just very gently, so breathing in through the nose, and just out through the mouth very gently, you're just beginning to tell the nervous system, there's no problem, I'm safe. If you're shallow breathing, in through the nose or in through the mouth, we're sending a signal that we need to be energized, we need to be more alert. But for what? So again, we need to extract through movement, through the breath, that we're in a good place. And just the extending of the exhale is very powerful in telling the brain that you're in a good place. So your survival system center begins to calm down, and your smart brain begins to move back online. Because when we become anxious, your smart brain says, I shouldn't get involved in this because rationality isn't a great thing for being in danger. So your survival center will take over. But most of our dangers, unless they're life-threatening, are simply ego-threatening, which again is that irrationality that just comes out of nowhere. So with the breath, you can simply control which part of the brain is more responsive. So just extending your exhale, smart brain online.
There's so much in what you said. I think, of course, the fight and flight, the feeling like we have a massive challenge ahead of us. And when we have, we're not actually in fight or flight or need to be in sort of survival mode, but we have that sort of reaction in our bodies is so important. I also thought it was interesting when it's almost like saying, don't think about anxiety, don't think about anxiety, don't think about anxiety.
Yeah, try not to.
How can you not think about anxiety?
Yeah, I love anxiety. I absolutely love anxiety. I think anxiety is the pathway to freedom.
Tell us about that.
Because, again, without anxiety kicking up and trying to get your attention, think of it like a fire alarm. A lot of people do a breathing hack. You can go on Instagram and you'll see me on Instagram showing how to reduce anxiety very quickly. And these are hacks, and they're very useful if you're feeling overwhelmed. But the reality is, like a fire alarm, if it's kicking off, you're going to have to still look for the fire. You're going to have to find out where the fire is. And by making those changes like I did, I worked on myself holistically. I improved my quality of life in ways I would never have done without anxiety being there. It's given me a whole career. I talk to people, thousands of people a day get to experience part of my work, and that's because of everything that I've been through. All that suffering has enabled me to create a perspective which resonates with a lot of people. So, think about if we see negativity as the enemy, then we'll always be fighting it, always resisting it, which again is the ego. But when you begin to relax with that and see the benefits, the possibilities of how can this benefit me? How can I grow from this? Again, the gold begins to reveal itself, and we grow in ways we would never have imagined.
So are those the questions then? How can I benefit from this? Where can I go from this? And are those questions that we try to answer during that period of what might be crisis mode? Or
yeah, no. When you've done a little hack to calm your nervous system down, again, this is why I'm a big fan of journaling or having a coach or even looking at therapy. Just asking, what is it that I need to change? Like for example, I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I was drinking caffeine into the evening, and then wondering why I couldn't sleep. No, it's just a thing back then. It was just like what we did. So obviously that needed a change. But without anxiety being there, I wouldn't have even addressed it. I was living unsustainably. So just asking, and it's usually the smallest of things that we can do to make the biggest of changes. Are we moving enough? Am I at my desk too much? Have I not really spoken to someone today who I love? How do I feel about myself? Those sorts of questions. We can just get a sense of what is it that we need to do. And if we ask ourselves a question, the brain has to look for an answer.
Yeah. I find that I often do this work when I am in sort of this crisis mode or something's happened that I think, right, I need to feel better. What can I do? What do you think about sort of preparing ourselves a little bit in advance of these moments, or just trying to sort of, I guess, integrate this work throughout our lives?
Yeah, it's prepare. Train your brain to manage a difficult situation. So I teach a simple ABC system that you can just use repeatedly when you're in a calm place, and we can be quite good at imagining something that would terrify us or would trigger us. And so the ABC system, if you just practice it, can rewire the brain so that when you do face a difficult situation, you're more likely to fall into that, into that natural habit, and you'll manage it quite easily. I had a client recently who, it's very common now for women to become more anxious about driving their kids to school in the car, especially if they're young, because suddenly it's the brain just says, what if we kill the kids on the way to school? And suddenly that panic attack that can be created from those sorts of negative thoughts stops them driving their kids to school. So I help a lot of people travel again. And they came to me recently and said the ABC system just kicked in and I got the kids to school. It's really lovely. So ABC. So A is for accepting the anxiety. Yeah, if you fight it, if you resist it, you're just going to turn it up. And I know that can feel difficult to do, but when you start to do B, a little bit of extending the exhale with breath work, it becomes easier just to allow yourself, your thoughts and your feelings just to simply be there. It's really, really gentle. And then C, choose. I teach a variety of different choices, but just choose to label this. This is just anxiety. It will pass soon. Yeah, and that reduces it by about 25%. A simple label, this is just anxiety, it will pass soon. Yeah, it's not anything that I have to fight, resist, which is the natural temptation to get rid of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to me about medication. You said at the beginning, it was a choice that you didn't go down that path. Yeah. And I imagine you do have clients that talk to you about medication. Did you ever go down that route at all? And what do you advise when people ask you about it?
Again, some people, medication might be very helpful if they are really experiencing panic attacks every day and they're completely overwhelmed. And I do advise speaking to your GP to find out if there's any medical conditions that might be exacerbating your anxiety. Like I had one client who had really low vitamin D levels, and they wouldn't have discovered that without going to the doctors. I suggested that they do that. They sorted out their vitamin D, for example. That's one thing, and they felt a lot better. It wasn't the root cause, but it really helped them. But with medication itself, like I was offered it was offered out like sweets, which I thought was quite shocking, when there was no question of, are you drinking alcohol? How much? How much caffeine are you doing? What's your lifestyle like? What's going on in your life? And there was none of that. It was simply, here's 5 questions about your thoughts. Okay, you should take these tablets, which are incredibly powerful. And I would say to anyone, do explore it with your GP, it's okay. But why not have a look at what you could do outside of your life holistically to make some little steps and changes that might make you feel different. And I've seen so many clients, I've seen thousands of them, have made such powerful, positive changes just through simple steps. And they go, oh yeah, actually I am drinking caffeine at night. I was working with someone who had insomnia, and we couldn't work out where it was coming from. And just before he left, he went, yeah, looking forward to my JD and Coke tonight. And I was just like, come back in and sit down. We just have a little chat about this. Little things can make a difference.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's so, you can get very, very complex and think, oh, was it this? And this thing happened sort of 15 years ago. And of course, that is the truth of it. And that will make a massive factor. But I didn't realize about vitamin D. And I've got really low vitamin D levels. I didn't realize that there was a connection at all between vitamin D and well-being in that sense. I just thought it was vitamin D and sort of physical health. So there's so much actually that we could do, little changes, in fact.
Exactly. You've got to look at medication is just going to suppress what you've got going on. And I'm a big believer in your mind, body, and spirit are going to go, that's lovely, but we'll keep knocking louder in another way until you look at the bigger picture of what's going on with you. So you can suppress anxiety, you can self-medicate. People do that with drugs, drink, and food, and a variety of other things. Or you can, take it's a harder path. You're going to have to choose your hard, because anxiety is really hard. You can choose your hard and do the work to liberate yourself from what it is that's been holding you back all this time.
Anxiety is so hard that when it arrives, you want to push it away, but actually there's work to be done that can relieve yourself of it. We've only got 5 minutes left. I want to talk to you about the spiritual element of the work that you do. Yeah. You have touched on it a little bit, but talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the next stage in human development is what I call the awakened mindset. So an awakened mindset in brain terms, which actually a little bit of science is, I mentioned it earlier, when your default mode network quietens that much, and they've replicated this in labs with psilocybin, people who have these wonderful awakening experiences where they feel one with everything and very peaceful, connected, they realize the truth about themselves. So we know that happens because the default mode network quietens through drugs. But you can do that through doing the work on yourself. And when you do it to a certain point, by strengthening the central executive network, people seem to be more in tune with who they are, what they really want, what their real purpose is, compared to what the ego thought it should be doing, which we can only modify ourselves and placate the ego for so much before we need to get back to the truth of who we are. So we awaken to the truth of who we are. So the spiritual side of it is more about consciousness, our awareness, and living life more authentically and aligned with who we really are. And I think that is often missing because we spend life so much trying to placate and modify the ego. It's almost like you're constantly modifying and making your fancy dress for your soul to feel like more comfortable, instead of addressing what is it the soul needs from me, really? What needs to happen here?
But how do we get to that soul? Because we're so used to the ego is what we're used to.
Yeah.
So how do we get and access that voice and really...
Well, again, a lot of people access it through meditation, through journaling. Most people have had that voice of inspiration at some point that has come out of nowhere, that insight, or the strange synchronicities that lets them know that there's something bigger than themselves. And whilst the ego may have a story about that, because it loves to control, it loves to create stories which makes us feel less and create a struggle, because that's the way it's been conditioned. The more we quieten it down through doing the inner work with ourselves, the more we connect with who we really are. And that is powerful. I love doing that sort of work. And I get to see that with clients just beginning to live life more authentically. You don't have to believe in everything, it sounds a bit woo-woo or anything like that, and that could be off-putting for some people. It's more about our spiritual essence and who we really are, and connecting with that and living life from there.
Such beautiful answers. Yeah. And then yourself, and where are you placing your energy at the moment? I know something exciting might be going on next year.
There's a few things. I'm working with, I've got a book coming out next year called Anxiety, Your Wake-Up Call. So that would be very exciting. I have a writing coach who's doing amazing work to help me refine and make that message really as precise as possible. You learn a lot about yourself writing a book. There's a lot that comes out of that.
Would there be autobiographical elements of this book?
Yeah, it's a big part of my story, but more it's a very... Because some anxiety books give you anxiety just looking at them. They're so huge. There's a famous one by Dr. David Burns. I was like, I'm not going to read that. That's a lot going on. So I wanted to create a resource which was simple, to the point, and focuses on the root causes. So helping reduce anxiety, focus on the root causes, and give people the tools and strategies so they know exactly what to do without having to sift through pages and pages of information. That's been a challenge. in its own. And there's a new project working with entrepreneurs, business owners who I'm very excited, who are making big impacts in the world, to help them become more awakened, enlightened in themselves, because then they spread that through their companies and businesses as well. So it's creating a big ripple. But yeah, it's a very exciting time, very exciting time.
It really is. And it's such a pleasure to talk to
You're welcome.
you.
Nice
Thank you
to talk to you.
so much for talking to us. Paul Sheppard.
Thank you.
Will you be sticking around if anyone's got any questions they might want to ask you? So if anyone's got any questions they want to put to Paul, please do find him. We've got 15 minutes till our next talk, but I know that was so wonderful. I really, really appreciate you talking to us. And you have packaged anxiety. I actually don't feel anxious. We've talked about it for half an hour, and yet I don't have that reaction. And actually, that's because of the way
breathe.
It's the way that you are. It's the way that you are. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks to you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to our Wow Talks podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. And we'd love for you to share your own wisdom on wellness. Join the conversation, share this episode with a friend, or follow us on social media for more updates at Wisdom on Wellness. Until next time.